Hi, this is Greg coming at you again with another installation of Operating in the Creative. I just want to make a real quick video and say something that's been on my mind lately. My wife and I have been talking about the shift of consciousness like we always do. And I said to her that, okay, it has been said among many in the conscious community that every 250,000 years or so, that there's a shift in there's a shift in the universe where the shift in consciousness changes to different groups. Like, for instance, the universe is made of 4 quadrants. The upper 2 quadrants are the female energy. The lower 2 quadrants are the male energy. And as of about 2011, 2012, we shifted from the lower. Oh yeah, and it goes in a counterclockwise direction. So in 2012 or so, we shifted from the lower right male-dominated quadrant to the upper right female-dominated quadrant. And each quadrant, I think, is like basically takes about 125,000 years or so. So technically, so that would mean that the female energy is going to dominate for the next 250,000 years. Well, I told my wife, I said, now wait a minute, hold on a second. I said, first of all, if you look at the history of this earth and the beings that have been on this earth, you have to consider that. And technically speaking, Caucasians, most people don't realize this, Caucasians have only been on this planet for maybe about 6 to 10,000 years. Okay? Before that, the earth, and I mean, this is a well-known fact in Egyptian history. In Egyptian history, which predates European history, the females dominated. You had female virgin queens that basically ruled Egypt for hundreds of thousands of years. Right? That's a known fact. Okay, but what has happened is that when the Caucasians came on the earth about 10,000 years ago or so, they usurped their authority and took over dominance, all right? And they did it out of the plan of the universe. In other words, it was not necessarily their time at that time to dominate, like 6,000 years ago. It wasn't. Or if it was, I mean, you can argue that it was because the universe has shifted to the female. No, actually, you can't. You can't argue that, because if the female energy just started, then that means that about 10,000 years ago or so, that the Caucasian female had no right to dominate during that time. Okay? So what I told my wife, what that tells me is that if Caucasians, all right, basically bullied their way into dominance, then they basically forfeit their right to dominance in their next cycle, because they usurped authority that they didn't have to dominate in this cycle. So, having said that, instead of, and oh yeah, and I would need to mention too that this female energy that I'm talking about this dominating female energy now, this is not a female energy that is going to be dominated by Caucasians or non-melanated people, to be more specific. All right, this 250,000 year cycle is going to be dominated by melanated women. Okay, but given the fact that Caucasians basically took over dominance when it wasn't their turn, they forfeit any dominance that they would have after the 250,000 year cycle. Okay, so having said that, not only is it is my idea, it is my belief that the melanated woman is going to dominate not just in the upper uh, quadrants of the feminine energy, but because the non-melanated people decided to usurp authority they didn't have, then the melanated woman also has a right to take over their time period of at least the first 125,000 years or so of the cycle that the non-melanated people would have had. That's only fair. Since they want to usurp authority they don't have, then they forfeit the authority that they would have had. And that's my idea. And speaking along that lines, uh, it's like I'm also reminded when I was in seminary at the Interdenominational Theological Center in Atlanta, which is part of the AU Center, Atlanta University Center, which is predominantly black colleges. Okay, I remember sometime around 2005 or so, I was in this class with a professor, Dr. Amer. I don't remember exactly which class it was she taught. It kind of went along the lines of womanist studies. And see, there's a difference between feminism and womanism. Feminism is the movement that non-melanated white women started, I guess, back in the 1930s or so. But if you notice that the womanist movement back then did not include the woman of color or the melanated woman. Now, the head of the womanist studies at the Interdenominational Theological Center, her name is Jacqueline Grant. I had like 3 classes with her, and in all 3 classes, she made the comment that one difference between feminism and the womanists is that womanists are all inclusive, whereas the feminists weren't. So I argued with her on that and told her that, okay, if you say that womanists are all inclusive, then why is it that you do not include the white women? Why is it that you don't embrace them? I mean, just because they didn't embrace you doesn't make it right for you not to embrace them. And I told her that it's been my experience that uh, most people of color embrace all races of people. That's just from my observation. What I've seen in life is that for the most part, people of color embrace all races, whereas Caucasians don't. And I told her, I said, so that doesn't make you right just because, on one hand you're saying that you're all inclusive, but on the other hand, no, you're not. So which is it? And of course, she couldn't answer my question and didn't even like me asking that question, but it's a valid question. So I wouldn't necessarily make the womanist, um, I'm not going to let them off the hook either. Okay? But in any case, for the next, uh, say, 250,000, that maybe about 750,000 years, it is a melanated woman that is going to rule. And if you notice that, if you see on TV, you see a lot, the commercials, a lot of the commercials, a lot of the TV shows show a black man with a white woman. All right, that's just Hollywood and the, powers that be trying to hold on to their power, trying to basically, still say that, because basically what they're saying is that, the black man might have a position, but when he dies, his money's still going to go to the white woman. No. Good try, but that's not going to work. Okay? Women of color. Oh, yeah, another thing, too. There was a lady, Candace, I forget her name, Candace something or other. She's really good. She's on YouTube a lot. She made the argument that really, other than the social economical aspect, there's really no such thing as racism, right? And she said that white people are always trying to perpetuate racism, not black people. You know, black people. And she said yes, there is a disparity among in the social economical arena, but that disparity is lacking as well. And another thing I told my wife, the Census Bureau says that 17% of our population is people of color. I have to argue that because when I look around, it looks more like 40%, 35, 40%. And they also say that 70% of cosmetics and makeup and everything is bought by women of color. That doesn't make sense either because if the melanated black population consists of 17% of the population in America, okay, and half that population is women, so it's basically 49, 51%, whatever. Okay, so if half that population is women, you're looking at what, 9% of the population buying 70% of cosmetics, and given the fact that the people of color are social economically uh, uh, lacking in finances, that's impossible. It is impossible for 9% of the population to be buying 70% of the makeup in this country. So that alone will also that tells you two things. Number one, right, there's more than 17% of the entire population being people of color. And I think I'm right. It's more like 35, 40%. Number two, it tells you that people of color have more wealth than they want people to believe. Okay, so so they keep perpetuating this belief that people of color are lesser than Caucasians because they don't want people to know that people of color are actually wealthier than Caucasians are. They're wealthier. They have access to more wealth. They're more creative. There's more of them, around than 17%. See, that's going to stop too. That little nonsense is going to stop as well. But that's basically what I wanted to say. It's just something that's on my mind. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please feel free to give me a comment. And that's all I have to say today. So have a great day. Bye bye.